So here's the summary of another subject, network markets. So why do people go to a pub? Think about it for a moment. I mean, it's cheaper to drink at home, isn't it? Well, of course, people go to a pub because there are more people there. So the value of this service grows the more people there are. So let's think about the first fax machine. The first person who bought a fax machine. What was the value of this product for that person? The value was, of course, zero because there is nobody else she or he can send fax to. Okay? So actually, we have a lot of products, a lot of services, which for which the value depend on the number of users. Think about WhatsApp. If you are the only one who has WhatsApp, it has no value at all. The more of your friends, the more of your family that has WhatsApp, the higher the value of WhatsApp. The same goes to Instagram and Facebook and Tinder and YouTube and Waze and so on. Many digital products and services are subject to a network effect. So the value depends on the number of users. So when the value of a product to one user depends on how many other users there are, we call it a network effect. In the economic books and articles, they might call it also network externalities or demand side economies of scale. But you don't have to worry too much. You should simply understand the concept network effect. So network effects can be positive and negative. In this course, we refer only to positive network effects. However, sometimes they are negative. For example, think about a traffic jam. The more people that use the highway, the lower would be the value of the highway because of traffic jams. Network effects can be direct and indirect. So they are direct when it actually works through the product itself. Think about telephone, okay? So we're all connected to the same telephone network, and therefore the value of the telephone increases. However, it can also be indirect. You might buy a game console just because some other friends of yours have the same game consoles, but you bought it because you want to exchange games, okay? Or if a person would buy a computer, let's say Macintosh in the past, actually this person could exchange software with a smaller market because not many people had Macintosh. Maybe it was 8% of the market, maybe even less. So it's direct when we think about telephone line, where it works via the product. It's indirect when it works via complementary products or complementary services. And network effects can be one-sided, like on the telephone, one person to talk to the other, or two-sided. So let's say in Get Taxi, it's a two-sided network effect because we have two different audiences, two different markets. On one hand, we have the taxi drivers. On the other hand, we have the passengers. That's why it's a two-sided network effect. Or if you think about eBay, it's a two-sided network effect because you have on one side of the market the buyers, on the other side of the market the sellers. So the more buyers there are, the higher the value to the seller. And the more sellers there are, the higher the value to the buyers. Same way with Get Taxi. The more taxi drivers there are, the higher the value for passengers. And the same with Airbnb and Tinder and so on and so on. And when is it multi-sided? When you have more groups that actually use the same platform. For example, on Facebook, you have users, you have app developers, and you have advertisers. So you have three different groups, and they actually impact each other. The more users there are, the higher the value to the app developers, but also to the advertisers who try to sell something to each and every one of us. So real networks, actually, when you have a physical connection, we say it's a real network and it's a direct network effect. Virtual networks are networks when you don't have linkage, when it's invisible. And here on virtual networks, we have an indirect network effect. Again, virtual networks are those, for example, with the Macintosh users. So here it works via the software. Can I exchange software with other people? Or game consoles, can I exchange games with other people? So please remember the definition. Real networks are like email users, like fax machines, like telephone lines, and it's a direct network effect. Virtual networks, it works via the complementary products or complementary services. So we gave already many examples. I'll skip this slide. So basically, network effects create positive feedback. In other words, the more people that use WhatsApp, the higher the value of WhatsApp, and the higher the chance that more people will download the app. So it's like a snowball, okay? And that creates TP markets, okay? Sometimes markets that are subject to network effect will tip and favor one big company. We have seen it in the past. There was a competition between Facebook and MySpace. So these social networks grew together and reached a certain point from which Facebook grew very rapidly and MySpace almost disappeared. So the market tipped to favor Facebook. And the result is a winner takes all or winner takes most. So what's a winner takes all or winner takes most? That's a market where you have one very strong company that has a lot of power. Think about Facebook in social media, Google in search engines, and so on. Sometimes actually the winner will have actually a worse technology, not the best technology, but the worst technology. And we'll tell the story of QWERTY soon, so you'll understand. Here is an example of a winner-takes-all market. That's the desktop search engine market share. You see Google with almost 82%. That's a winner-takes-most or winner-takes-all market. The same with desktop operating system market share. We can see here the market share of Windows. Yes, it's been declining, but still, it's definitely a winner-takes-most or winner-takes-all market. So why did actually the market tip in favor of Facebook, but LinkedIn was not affected? In other words, MySpace disappeared, but LinkedIn did not. Can you think of any reason? How come we still have LinkedIn in the presence of Facebook? So, well, there is a clear need for differentiation in the market. Okay, people go to LinkedIn because they want to find a job, or because they want to find employees, or because they want to find customers. Usually, when people go to Facebook, it's more for social needs. Okay? They want to brag about the last vacation in Greece, or they want to make sure people know how happy they are, and so on. So, as long as there is a clear need for differentiation, actually, that reduces the chance for a TP market. So, what's viral growth? Well, as you know, viruses grow very quickly among humans, unfortunately. The same goes for many digital products of services. Because of the positive feedback, this snowball effect, because of the network effect, actually, in many cases, there is a slow growth in the beginning, because people are not sure which technology actually will prevail. In many cases, we have different products or different technologies, so on, different standards or formats. But once one of those technologies or products get a head start, actually, because of the positive feedback, the growth is very quick. So it's very similar to how viruses spread in the biological world. Suddenly, everybody has WhatsApp, or suddenly everybody uses Waze. That's what I'm talking about. It looks like an S curve. A slow start, then if it's successful, not all products are successful, but if it's a success, it will explode. It will grow very quickly. And then when most people have it already, the rate of growth will slow down. So consumer expectations are critical, because if everybody believes that WhatsApp will be the next big thing, the next instant messaging app, everybody will download it and it will become the next big thing. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's why companies actually do their best to manage expectations. Okay? Their marketing campaigns, in many cases, actually, the message is our product is going to be the next big things. They know that if we all believe that, they will rule the market because of the network effect. So a nudge in the right direction at the right time can make all the difference. And there are many historical examples of products actually that were not better than others, but they managed to reach critical mass before their competitors, and they managed to rule the market, to have a winner-takes-all situation. So here's another example, very old one. That's the picture phone. And actually, it was quite an amazing product. It's from 60 years ago. And it allows you to see the person you talk to on a black and white 5 inches screen. And this product actually failed. And it failed because it never reached a critical mass. It was so expensive that it never reached a critical mass. So even if you bought it, you had nobody to talk to. That's what the product said. That's why a lot of buyers fear from unpopular products. That's why there is this period of time where the market is slow. That's in the beginning, because we are not sure, should we buy it or not? Is it actually going to have is it going to reach a critical mass? Are many of my friends going to have a fax machine, for example? Because if they are not, why should I buy a fax machine? So there is another phenomenon called collective switching costs. It means that basically convincing 10 people to switch to your product is more than 10 times as hard. Okay, that's the issue here. Even if you have something free of charge, think about operating systems. There is a free operating system called Ubuntu, and people don't switch. They are used to Windows, and there's collective switching costs. Nobody wants to stay outside of the party. Nobody wants to be the first one in this new network where you don't have a critical mass of users, okay? So it's a very strong force. And of course, this force protect the competitive advantage of incumbents, of firms that actually have a strong position in the market, of companies like Microsoft that has Windows. So it protects their competitive advantage, these collective switching costs, but collective switching costs are very bad news for startups, because if you want to enter such a market, you have to offer them something so much better that they will be willing to switch. And in many cases, it's impossible. Again, think about the example of Ubuntu, a free of charge operating system that almost nobody uses. The same goes for QWERTY. QWERTY is the format or the design of keyboards. It's actually the worst design probably possible, but we are stuck with it because of collective switching costs. It's a great example for switching costs that we all share. An historical example, I'm taking you 40 years back to the early 80s. There were 3 operating systems, CPS, DOS. DOS is actually the one that came before Windows. It means disk operating system, and Apple. And none of them was better, actually. I mean, technologically, they were quite similar. DOS was not the best, but they managed to seal a deal with IBM. IBM was the largest computing company in the world. They had the PC-1 in 1981. And the growing user base of the IBM PC, of course, brought much more users to the DOS operating systems. More users, more app developers, more users, but also people who had to decide which operating system to use would usually choose the one that has a critical mass. Because, for example, if you learn how to use it at home, you would prefer to use at home the same system that you have at the bank you work for, or the company, or another company that you work for. So there's a clear network effect here. And at the end, the result you've already seen. I showed you the statistics. Nowadays, they have like 80% of the market. Before, they had more than 90% of the market. And that's the result. I mean, this little small nudge, this deal with IBM actually helped them rule the market for 4 decades. So it wasn't because of their technology, it was because they managed to reach critical mass of users first. So if you want a visualization of it, I mean, the more users there are, actually the value grow because of the network effect, but the average cost per user goes down because the marginal cost is zero. So each new customer costs you less, okay? And that's why some technology companies are very profitable. They have a huge user base, so they create a lot of value to users, but on the other hand, the cost that they incur per user are very low. They are negligible. They are nearly zero. And another user comes and increase the value of the product, but this new user also reduced the average cost per user. So if you have billions of users like Google, like Microsoft, like Facebook, you actually are in a place where you make a huge profit, and the collective switching costs actually help you maintain this market position. So what are the implications for marketing strategy, for business models, and for market structure? So first of all, marketing strategy, of course, you want to be the first to reach critical mass. And you do everything to get that. I mean, some companies give their product free of charge, for example. Some would use very low prices. But the main strategic goal, at least for a startup in network markets, would be to gain critical mass before your competitors. Business models, well, you'll use business models that actually allow you to get to the critical mass. So for example, the freemium that we have discussed earlier in this course is a very good business model for that purpose, because you give them a free version, even though it's a simple one, and you grow the user base of your product. And market structure, well, what we see here usually is very concentrated markets. In other words, there's a lot of power concentrated in a few hands. Think about the market for search engines or the market for social media. I mean, there is a lot of power in the hands of just a few companies. Very concentrated markets, even though there are millions of apps. So what are the practical implications? First, we have to price not on the basis of current costs, but on the basis of anticipated costs. In other words, penetration pricing, in other words, very low prices or even zero. The main strategic goal is to get to the larger user base possible. Of course, we increase volume by broadening product range, so we'll have different versions of the same product. As you know, it's easy to do it because of the digital format, to expand, and we will try to expand internationally, again, to increase the size of the user base. Foster your ecosystem. In other words, we want as many app developers because each app developer increase the value for our users. Think about Microsoft and its huge number of apps that work with Windows, or Android that has a huge ecosystem of apps. And since one of the most valuable assets is your user base, we'll do everything to keep it. So for example, companies leverage the existing user base when they launch a new product. Microsoft has done it many years. So each new generation of its operating system actually will fit the same user base. So they'll need just usually small upgrades to make sure nobody switch to another operating system. So Metcalfe, that was a self-learning exercise. And basically what it says is that the value of a network is relative to the number of users, to the square number of users, okay? That's basically the Metcalfe law. You can search it up and have a self-learning exercise by yourself. So the business implications are basically that if your network, your user base grow by 2 or duplicates, means that its actually value grow 4 times, okay? That's basically the implications. But in many cases, it's not true because if you think about it, yes, there are more than 2 billion users on Facebook, but I don't want to interact with 99.99% of them. That means that not all connections have a value, okay? So the Metcalfe flow produces an inflated value for startup or for companies, but in many cases, it's not that true, okay? It's not true that if the value of Facebook's user base increase by 2 or duplicates, it's not true that the value of Facebook will be 4 times higher, okay? Because most people actually are not interested in interacting with everybody on Facebook. They're interested in interacting with their friends and family. So most potential links or contacts actually have no value at all. Standard wars. So basically, again, in network markets, we might have standard wars or format wars. So what's a standard? It's basically a set of rules, okay? It could be a specifications, a format, an interface, a system that allows interoperability. Think about, for example, you can send email from one email service to another, and that's because there are protocols, there are standards, there are sets of rules that make this communication, this interoperability possible. The same when you buy a light bulb in the supermarket, there's a standard, so you don't have to measure the light bulbs at your home. So there are public standards, usually set by public bodies, like internet protocols, and there are private standards that are owned by somebody, by some company. For example, the Windows became the standard in the market, and it's a private standard. It belongs to Microsoft. So there are lots of examples for standards, and this table actually presents de facto standards, okay? De facto industry standards. You can look it up in the slides, of course. So what is a standard war or a format war? So when two new incompatible technologies struggle to become the de facto standard. And please remember, we talk about markets that are subject to network effects. So we had two very known standard wars or format wars in the 1970s between VHS and Betamax, and in recent years between Blu-ray and HD DVD. And in both cases, actually, the technology that won because it had more supporters, okay? It wasn't that they had a better technology. At the end of the day, they managed to build a larger coalition. If you sell a video player or a DVD player, HD DVD player, you have to convince studios in Hollywood to support your format or your standard. You have to convince stores like Blockbuster or Amazon or Walmart to sell your CDs, and you have to convince households or end users to buy your player. So you have to convince the entire world that your technology is going to actually rule the market. And of course, you have to convince your competitors to sell or to manufacture players or machines that actually use your technology and not the alternative or the competing technology. So that's basically the bottom line of it. You can read all the history here in the slides, but the bottom line, HD DVD won because it had more supporters. It had more studios in Hollywood that supported its format or its standard. And it was like a snowball because after Warner Brothers decided that they support only Blu-ray, then other companies follow, other studios in Hollywood followed suit, and then also retailers decided that they want to sell only the Blu-ray format, and it was a winner-takes-all market. At the end, the HD DVD surrendered and said, at the end, we believe widespread adoption of a next generation format will ultimately be determined by the consumer. So it was the households in the US, at least 60% of them chose Blu-ray And that actually what tipped the market in favor of Blu-ray, and that's the format that won. So how can companies win a standard war? They have to assemble allies, okay? They have to convince. It's like a political game. It's like somebody who tries to build a coalition in a parliament. You have to convince customers and complementers. That's companies that create complementary products or services, suppliers, and even competitors. You have to convince everybody to support your format, whether they are content creators or retailers or even competitors. You have to be early in the market. Of course, penetration pricing, meaning that you sell at a cheap price, at a low price, to get to the critical mass as fast as possible. You have to manage expectations. So your marketing campaigns have a clear message. My technology is going to rule the market. Of course, share value with others. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't join your coalition, okay? For example, if you have patents and you try to convince your competitors to produce their players with the Blu-ray technology, you have to make sure that they also earn enough. So it's worthwhile for them economically to be part of your coalition. And sometimes you have to achieve compatibility with existing products. Usually, if there is already an installed user base that uses a specific technology, it sometimes makes sense that your new technology or product or service will be compatible with existing networks. That will increase the chance for it to grow and succeed. And that's it. I'll see you in the next video.